Hello, everybody. Welcome. Come on in. You're just joining the ProdPad Product Expert Series, this series of webinars that we run here. It's usually in the format of either a presentation or a fireside, like we're doing today, a fireside being a conversation between myself and the expert. And it's always with a focus on delivering valuable expertise and content and learning and this facilitation of the sharing of ideas. We want to learn from the experts that we are bringing in here today. Now, before we jump in and introduce my guests, I just wanted to talk a little bit about this tool that we've built. This is a tool that myself and my co-founder, Simon, and I built when we were product managers ourselves. We essentially needed something to help us keep track of experiments and feedback and all the ideas, all the stuff in our backlog, our roadmaps and everything. And it was basically something that gave us control and organization and transparency into this product management system we were building and helped us create this single source of truth for our product decisions. So we started sharing with other product people around us and is now used by thousands of teams around the world. So it's actually something that you can use, you can try out for free. We have a completely free trial. You don't need a credit card to get started. We even have a sandbox mode, which you can use completely for free. It has example data in there, including lean roadmaps and OKRs and idea backlogs that are pre-filled with all sorts of stuff. So you can get a feel for how this stuff all sort of fits together. And our team is made up of product people. So it was founded by product people. We've got lots of product people within the team. So we live and breathe by your feedback. So we'd love for you to jump in, give it a try, and then let us know what you think. And there's actually one thing that I wanted to call your attention to, because there's a new feature that's in beta. And as a product person, you can imagine how much we love getting new stuff out there and sharing it with you. It's actually a new confidence score that you can assign to the ideas in your backlog. So for those of you who know ProdPad, you know that you can create or add an effort and impact score and then map it out on this priority chart. And you can see how recently you updated your ideas, but you can also now see the confidence that you have in your ideas. So is this something that you've just made up, you've heard your CEO ask for once or a customer quickly ask for, or is this something that you've got lots of research behind, you've done a bunch of prototypes, you've done the legwork to prove that this is in fact the right thing to go work on? So that confidence builds and it gives you a better idea as to what sort of things maybe should go on the roadmap and maybe which things you need to do some work on before you push them forwards. So that's one of the latest features that we have available in ProdPad. It is under beta, but you can turn that on yourself if you get in there and start a trial. We'd love to show that off to you today. But there's a reason why I wanted to flag that one up today, because we're actually going to be talking about confidence meters today, because our special guest today is Gilad, who is the creator of the confidence meter, among other things. So I actually know Itamar through the Mind the Product community. For those of you who know me, know that I've been involved with Mind through that, where I've been learning from his articles and his talks on stage for years. Itamar is a coach, he's an author and a speaker, and he specializes in product management, strategy, and growth. He has over 20 years of experience in senior product management and engineering roles at places like Google, Microsoft, and startup. At Google, he led parts of Gmail and was the head of Gmail's growth team, resulting in 1 billion monthly active users. He publishes a popular product management newsletter and has developed several product management methodologies, including the GIST framework, which we're going to be talking about today, and the confidence meter, which is something we're going to be talking about today as well. So huge welcome, Itamar. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat to us today. Everyone jump in and say welcome to Itamar.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Great to have you here. And thanks for taking the time to chat and to talk us through this. So tell us a little bit about your background. What have I missed from that high level bio? How did you get into product management?
I started as an engineer back in the 90s. I'm pretty old. And somewhere in the early 2000s, I started switching to the dark side and I became a product manager. And I kept doing this for about 15 years, as you said, in Israel, where I'm from, initially in startups and scale-ups, but then I also worked in a couple of big internationals, Microsoft and Google. And at Google, I worked initially on YouTube, but then mostly on Gmail. And that was a pretty interesting set of challenges, obviously. And a lot of my thoughts and some of the things I'm going to share with you are kind of based on my experiences at Google and other companies, and trying to summarize some of the learnings I got along the way, making a ton of mistakes, obviously. And for the past 6 years, I've been coaching and working with many product teams and writing some of the things I learned. And that actually taught me an awful lot more as well. So happy to be here and share.
Absolutely. And thanks for sharing that. And yeah, I can absolutely empathize with that. Making a ton of mistakes. My first product jobs, and actually, frankly, all my product jobs were a series of making mistakes, doing it the wrong way, and then trying to learn from them and improve over time.
Right. Yeah. It's pretty humbling hearing all this praise being read to you, all your background, but it's actually in hindsight, we should be more humble about our abilities in the face of uncertainty, etc. So I'm here based on because I was lucky to work with good people, and I was lucky to learn from a lot of smart people before me.
Yeah. And I think that it's absolutely fair. One of the things that we do is we learn is that we write down the things that really worked for us. And so you've done a great job of laying a path for other people who followed behind you, writing down and sharing the way from some of the gotchas that you've fallen into.
Yeah, I try to publish every month a newsletter, but let's maybe jump in and let people, whether or not is this of any value to them, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the ones that you're probably best known for is this GIST framework, GIST. So tell us about that.
So I had a chance to work in Google and in other companies that were good and in companies that were less good. And I had a chance to work with a lot of other different product organizations. And one of the things I noticed is that the difference between a well-functioning organization that is able to create consistently outcomes and impact versus the more kind of, let's say, middle-of-the-road organization is their ability to deal in these 4 areas of setting goals, prioritizing ideas, experimenting and learning and adjusting, and implementing this, turning it into action with their agile team and with their stakeholders and with their managers. And that's often the hardest part. So I started thinking along these lines while I was at Google. I started identifying that I tried to reverse engineer the Google secret sauce. And then as I left and I started working with my clients, I started giving them piecemeal, and eventually it turned into a framework, which I call GIST, goals, ideas, steps, and tasks. And it's, to be perfectly honest, it's not completely original. It's based on many smarter people that came before me, but it tries to package a lot of the thinking, a lot of the methods of methodologies that I found most useful into one actionable framework. So shall I go and jump into it, or how would you like to go?
Yeah, would love to hear how it different than some of the other ones. How is it similar to some of the other ones that like where did it take inspiration from?
So it's both, I think it's both similar and different. Let me just maybe project my screen and I'll walk you through this.
Yeah, I think I've got to stop projecting mine. And if you've got something in there, oh, where's that button?
All right.
All right. Now you should be able to share yours. Get in there.
All right, let's go. Okay. Hopefully you guys are seeing this. So this is just the goals, ideas, steps, and tasks. And the core idea is you need to focus on a very small subset of goals at company level, at mid-level, at team level that are about outcomes, obviously, and about the things that are most important to you. And what I try to package in the goals layer is OKRs and how to basically distill your OKRs through a set of, I'm going out of order there, through what I call matrix trees. So basically you have your top level metrics, usually the North Star and a top business KPI. And from those, you start breaking them down into sub-metrics, sometimes called input metrics. And then that creates a model for you to visualize how your company is growing and how you can improve and where you are underperforming. And I found that it's much better to start from this perspective and then project the goals into the org structure than vice versa. What a lot of companies do is they start trying to assign to each team and each division a set of goals. And sometimes that maps out into the most important things. Sometimes it's a projection of the org structure into the goals. I rather that we look at this and say the 3 most important things are: we need to reduce churn from 5% to 3% per month. We need to focus on this opportunity we discovered in emerging markets, in the educational sector, and we need to improve the quality of our products and our infrastructure. These are the 3 things we need to achieve this year. And now let's see how this translates into sub-metrics and goals, and give this to the different teams. And at the same time, the teams need to generate also local goals because they are close to the market, they are close to the product, to the technology. So they know things that the managers sometimes don't know. So this whole process of top-down, bottom-up is something that Google at the time when I was there did pretty well, and I learned a lot from that. So that's one of the things I teach, how to traverse the hierarchy and merge the ideas and the goals of managers and team members. So that's the goals layer, just very briefly, metrics and OKRs.
Yeah. Who sets these goals? Is this set by top level management, or is the team involved with it? I mean, how does that work in the ideal world?
I don't know that there is an ideal world. Each company should choose what's pragmatic and working for it. I'll give you an example from Google, like the management of Gmail, which is one of the most important products of Google. It's in terms of usage, at least more than 1 billion users, would start out late in the previous quarter and set out a skeleton OKR and say, here are the main objectives we want to focus on. These key results we already know we want to achieve. Sometimes they know which key result, but they don't know the target. And sometimes they also know a key result and a target. Sometimes none of it. They just say, this is the objective, suggest some key results to us. It's called leadership by intent. They explain the intent, they explain what we're trying to achieve and why, and then they solicit the help of people in the different layers in filling up the gaps. And sometimes things will come down to me, to my level, to my area of responsibility, and I would suggest some stuff, and that might propagate to the level of the management. And sometimes I even saw things that I proposed that ended up in the company level OKRs. Not very often, I wasn't that senior, but it's very rewarding when something like this happens. So it's basically the managers are soliciting the help of filling up the goals. At the same time, they're also informing the people underneath or the people reporting, what are the most important things. So this churn goal, for example, it needs to translate into more tangible, because changing churn can break into many different things. So maybe we need to build a special task force for this. Maybe we need to have these 3 teams work on it together, or maybe 5 different teams. Each one will just take a step of it from the search perspective, from the, onboarding perspective, etc. And so there's different ways to translate those goals into action. But the key part is that we need to have a discussion. We need to keep having this continuous discussion about what are the most important goals and why. The anti-pattern I see a lot, and I'm sure you've seen this too, is that at this stage, people start talking about ideas already. They already forget about the goals. Everyone will start debating ideas. It's really sexy. And then what you get in the OKRs are actually the decisions already, which ideas we're already going to do. And then focus will be on the output, on the ideas, rather than on the key results, on what we need to achieve. So I'm a bit of a purist in this sense. I suggest not putting initiatives or any of these things in the OKRs. Keep the OKRs just about what you want to achieve this quarter or this year. Or it may be shorter if you start and try to push the ideas to the next level, which is the ideas layer. So in the ideas layer, we're basically doing prioritization. We're trying to decide out of the many ideas that we might be pursuing, which ones are the best.
And are these like high level ideas, or are these more granular feature level type things?
It really depends on where you're doing the discussion, but I suggest usually for managers, at least unless it's a really big company, to try to stop at the goals level. And it requires a lot of kind of leadership, strong leadership mentality, and allow the teams to actually collect the ideas from the stakeholders, from the managers, from the market, from the users, from the customers, and try to prioritize them and use an objective and transparent process to say, we think those are the ideas that present the biggest opportunity at the moment, knowing what we know now. And those are the ideas you start testing first. You don't necessarily have to build them. So that just means that you need a prioritization system. Even if you do the double diamond, if you go and you mapped out your problem space and you know all about the users and you know what you need, what you think the key problems, and then you go and you evaluate, you start creating ideas. Other ideas will come from the side. You always need prioritization. There's no clean process that avoid prioritization that I'm aware of. So it's not a bad word. I suggest using ICE, but it's obviously not the only method. ICE stands for Impact, Confidence, and Ease. There's a popular derivative called RICE, Rich, Impact, Confidence, and Ease. It's almost the same thing. I prefer to stick with ICE. And essentially, it's the I is about how much does this idea stand to contribute to the goals. And obviously you need clear goals for this and not many. I suggest a maximum of 4 key results per team. The is how easy or hard it is going to be, which is usually the inverse of person weeks. Although if you're working in a marketing team or a team that's where the scarcest resource is marketing dollars, it might be dollars. And then there's the confidence, which is how sure are we actually that the impact and is are for real? And you gave a very good explanation of what confidence is.
Yeah.
And the exercise here is to collect the ideas and to do this kind of quick scoring on all of them. And then do what you suggested. Think about, do we want to pick the ideas that are highest impact or the ones that are less risky, highest confidence, or maybe the easiest one, or a combination of those?
Yeah. And somebody actually asked the question, why do you not like to use reach?
Reach. Why don't I like to use reach? Explain reach to me. What is reach?
No, that's a really good question. I've heard it explained, and I might be wrong because I don't actually use reach either, but I've heard impact being how deeply does it impact each individual customer? So does it cause this much pain for them versus reach? How many customers does it reach? Now, maybe interpreting that wrong. Maybe other people have their own interpretation. I'm curious as to yours as well.
I'm sorry, I blanked out for a second. I thought reach is a completely different system. You mean the R part in rice?
R in rice, yeah.
Yeah, your explanation was bang on. That's exactly what it means.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, excellent.
So think of a few examples. Maybe you think of an idea that impacts a few power users that are really like a small subset, but they're very important for your business. In e-commerce, for example, a lot of the times, a lot of the revenue comes from a very small set of buyers. In usage, there's usually a power law. So you might come up with some ideas that touch on those people. The reach is pretty low, but with these people, it's very important to be successful. So that's just one example where the R doesn't always make sense to start breaking things into reach. I think people love rice because it gives them a more systematic way to calculate impact. Impact is the hardest part to calculate in the ICE course. And in my workshops, we really work on trying to find other ways except just banking on reach. But it is an important factor in some of these calculations. Sometimes you do need to factor in R reach, but it's just part of the I. That's at least my take on it.
Yeah, no, I don't personally use reach. I've tried to group it in with impact as a more holistic number. But one of the things, and maybe this is controversial, but I actually don't use rice or ICE in its fullest extent. And actually for a reason, because I love the idea of tracking and gathering the information on what the impact is and gathering the information on things like the confidence and the ease or effort. But I don't like multiplying the ones together. Maybe you could speak to this, because what I find is if you take an assumption and you multiply it by an assumption and multiply an assumption, you get a bigger assumption. You get
absolutely.
And what happens is, like, if the 7 is a guess and the 2 is a guess and the 5 is a guess, by the time you're done, you've got a whole bunch of guesses, which might give you some information. But then what happens is people tend to use the final scores as the word of God, right? The computer has spoken, and now we do this one first, and absolves themselves from the decision making of saying, actually, but we know we have to do the double opt-in first because the law says so, or because we've got this thing that's got a drop dead deadline, or because we know that this is actually the bigger problem, even though the score doesn't actually really take that into account.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. And I think that's a really good point. There's a lot of noise and a lot of variability in all of these numbers, especially when you're in the early stages of validating an idea. So in the multiplication of the 3, there's tremendous amount of noise. So I would argue that as long as confidence, and I will explain exactly what it means in a second, is low, you shouldn't even look at the I-score too much. It's completely noisy. And even when you do have I-scores, there's a hint suggesting these are the first ones to test. But you should never just go ahead and launch them just based on that's the highest scoring idea. That's a recipe for disaster. And as we mentioned, sometimes the better thing is to just sort by impact or sort by ease or sort by confidence to get that subset of working set of ideas that you want to pursue first. So not necessarily even based on the I-score. That is there to sometimes just defend you, because sometimes people might come in and say, my idea or the other. So you do the calculation with them and you show the total score is pretty low. And that kind of helps you balance opinions with kind of a more objective way. But you need to leave a lot of room for judgment. If you do see an idea that you do like, you should allow yourself to pick it, even if it's scoring very low.
That's really good, the guidance. And actually like the guidance around, if the confidence is low, then don't use it as a multiplier. I don't ignore it as a multiplier, because that's essentially, I think, as you're going to be talking about, is the importance of confidence is, you know, how much you actually know about this thing or not. Because otherwise, oftentimes we're just making these numbers up. We've kind of gone, yeah, I think it's important, or yeah, sure, this should be easy. And you don't know until you've really dug into it. I think what grinds my gears is when people come up with these scores and then they spend forever adjusting the scores or adjusting the algorithm and creating weights for the algorithms to make the scores reflect what they wanted the scores to say in the first place. And it's like, hey, just build what you know is the right thing anyways, because there's a reason we have humans doing this stuff. Product managers making human decisions. You know, that's your job, is to make the decision. It's not the job of your algorithm to do that.
Yeah, totally. And there's no algorithm, honestly. It's human judgment.
Yeah.
It just needs to, the challenge is we tend to fall in love with our ideas. So if you don't do this sort of analysis, you don't stop people and say, okay, what is the impact on the goals? How easy is it going to be? And where does your confidence coming on this idea? They tend to be carried away and fall in love with their ideas and push for them. And some of these people you cannot say no to, or they're more powerful. So I see ICE as the great equalizer. It forces everyone to say, okay, these are the rules of the game. Let's first do this analysis. Sometimes that cuts the discussion by an order of magnitude. I've noticed like debates that would rage on which idea is best for like hours and days and weeks, cut down to minutes or half an hour.
Yeah.
And people come out more happy and feeling that they came up with a better decision.
Yeah.
So,
and Oliver asked a pretty practical question here, is what scale do you use to define these numbers? Is it a 1 to 5? Is it a Fibonacci sequence, 1 to 10, that sort of thing?
I tend to use the classic that Sean Ellis came up with, which is 0 to 10 for each. But if you prefer t-shirt sizes, you can use 0 to 5, then just assign extra small, medium, etc. Just be consistent between your ideas. That's the trick. For impact especially, what's a 10? So think of something that is like the maximum you can imagine. You have a metric, you want to move it. What's the maximum you think one idea can possibly move this? Best case scenario, that's a 10. And then work your words backwards. What's 5? And don't forget about 0, because unfortunately, most of our ideas actually will not work. So there's a lot of ideas that actually belong in the 0 and sometimes in the negative. So, and it's a power law as well. As far as I know, very few ideas actually ever reach 8, 9, 10. If you're finding one of those, you're extremely lucky, which most people don't seem to actually resonate with, because I see people very general giving themselves 8, 9, and 10 for their ideas.
Yeah.
Sounds high impact. Why not? It's a 9.
Great idea.
Yeah. So I think you should tone down and imagine that most of your ideas are middle of the road or just incremental, and really keep those high numbers for the big ones.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, you mentioned ideas that are 0, which I get, ideas that are going to have no impact, but you also mentioned negative numbers for ideas. What does that mean?
So I usually don't recommend doing this in ICE. You just put a 0 if you realize it's going to be of negative impact. But a lot of, like, you worked in the industry for a while, you know this. Sometimes you launch stuff and you realize it was actually a net negative because it annoys users. It actually moves the metrics in the wrong direction. That happens. If you test yourself thoroughly, if you test the ideas, you're somewhat protected, but sometimes surprises happen. Think of the Galaxy Note 7 that was like exploding in people's hands when they went on airplanes. That's a true negative.
Negative, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. So be aware that this is possible too. Even if you really love your idea, it might turn into a negative one.
Yep. All right, that's good advice. Thank you.
So shall I explain about confidence a little bit more?
Yeah, I would love to dive into that. Thanks.
All right. Confidence is one of these terms that it's really easy to say, yeah, I have high confidence in this idea because I'm a small person, I'm experienced. Here's a completely logical explanation that will tell you why this idea is great. And in order to fend against this, I found that I need to create weights. This is, again, something that came from my experiences at Mail, because people at Google can be quite opinionated, and these are very smart and very articulate people. So I created this tool. It works a little bit like a thermometer. It goes from very low confidence, so in the area of 0, all the way to very high confidence, the area of 10, and that fits in the ICE score as well. But again, if you prefer 0 to 5, just change the weights. And this dark blue area, this quadrant, is about opinions. It could be your own opinion, self-conviction. You think it's a great idea. Congratulations, every terrible idea out there, someone thought it was great. So you get 0.01 out of 10 for that. You created a shiny pitch deck that explains why it's the best idea, 0.03. You connected it with some thematic support, the strategy of the company, it perfectly aligns with it. Or it's about, you know, the Web3 and the multiverse.
We put it on the blockchain. It's going to be awesome.
Exactly. With machine learning and AI. So that absolutely makes it a great idea. And not necessarily because right now, as we speak, there are thousands of projects that are doomed, that are built on these themes. And we just need to look back in history, not very far, to see how some of these trends didn't really pan out. The lighter blue area is about trying to validate the idea, but still staying in the building. So you can review it with other people and see what they say. This could be your colleagues, your managers, experts, stakeholders, and they're giving you opinions. And sometimes often this is a harder test because they might find flaws in the idea you didn't see. So on the flip side, psychologists found a lot of group dynamics that actually make groups choose ideas worse than individuals. One of them is groupthink. Another one is politics. Sometimes people kill good ideas or choose bad ideas due to politics. Not in your organizations, obviously, in other organizations, but it does happen sometimes. So that doesn't give you a lot of confidence either. Estimates and plans is you try, at least on paper, to see if the idea makes sense. You can do a business model canvas if it's a big idea, or some sort of back of the envelope calculation, just trying to see the funnel, how many people will see it, how many will try it, how many will convert, etc. And you'd be surprised how much better you can get your impact assessment based on that. And same you can do for estimates. You can break it into its parts and see how it converges. And some ideas will die on paper. Just when you do these exercises, you realize they're not as strong as you think. It's perfectly fine to park them here. But even if it looks still great on paper, that's just a bunch of educated guesses. You still didn't find outside data, which is this quadrant here, the pinkish area. So this data can be anecdotal. It can come from user interviews. It can come from your data. It can come from customer requests, but sporadic requests, or it could be from competitive analysis. Maybe one competitor has it. A typical case that I see is an idea that the company likes, or at least the influential people in the company, and the leading competitor has it, and that's it. Validation done. This is a good idea. Let's just go ahead and build it. And that almost never pans out. That competitor may have a different perspective, or they may have launched an idea that actually is a dud. You don't know. You cannot trust their judgment to replace yours. You need to test. And then the next level is getting more data, larger data sets from the market. So this could be through surveys, through smoke tests, fake door tests, very deep competitive analysis, especially trying to understand what problems or what user needs your competitors are trying to address. So that gives you slightly more confidence. So for many ideas that are very low risk, very low effort, you can stop there. If it still looks good, your judgment guides you, don't go crazy. You can launch it. But if there is more than minor risk, I suggest testing it. And the amount of testing depends, again, on the risk and the size of the idea. And we have various types of tests, from usability tests, moving on to longitudinal user studies, and eventually even to A/B tests, whatever it is that you can do. Early adopters, this whole gamut of things. I have a slide later if you guys want to see the gamut. And these things give you medium and high confidence. And usually you can stop there with most ideas and switch into delivery. But the nice thing is, as you validate, you're actually building. So you're not wasting time. You actually have some working code, and you have a much better understanding what you need to build. So it's good. It's not a bad thing to try to strive for higher confidence. And that really helps a lot with these internal debates and opinions. It's not fighting opinions, it's just supercharging opinions with little grain of evidence. And this is a tool that's actually being used by quite a few companies today. And it's exactly for this reason, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. We recommend this to a lot of ProdPad customers who are asking about how to use the confidence meter that we've built in. And I love how, frankly, vicious this thing is, because you have to get halfway through before you're even at the point where you're saying, okay, we're even talking low confidence here. 3/4 of the way through before you're even saying, okay, yeah, this might be a goer. And I think it's important to raise our standards of what we think is an acceptable idea or not. So we stop building so much junk, right? And we've got to stop spending our time building stuff that isn't the right stuff to do, because we can actually just spend this time doing the interviews, doing the surveys, doing these smoke tests, doing some of these steps to prove or disprove long before we actually break code in anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important because some people who don't come from products need some visualization of the risk that they're taking by pushing the team to just launch an idea.
Yeah, what this is actually really powerful for is, as a product manager, you have to say no a lot. And sometimes you have to say no to yourself as well. This can be a really powerful tool. If somebody comes up to you and says, hey, I've got this great idea, and they're in love with their idea. Everyone loves their ideas. I love my ideas, sometimes love other people's ideas. But this is a great tool to take the onus off you from saying no. It's helping you say no. It's the system saying, hey, hold back. Don't say yes to this because it's only a good idea because it's a trend right now, right? Everyone's using ChatGPT, or kind of showed that, back of envelope, it might work, but we don't actually have any proof that this is the right thing to do yet. So let's keep going. But here's the steps to get to that stage. And it just helps bring people along with that. So it doesn't look like you being evil product manager saying, nope, not that one either. Helps bring them along with that journey, I think.
Yeah, avoid the black box product management. So many stakeholders dislike, and justifiably, that's just the product manager just decided your idea is bad, doesn't work well. They're much better at escalating to managers than you. It usually doesn't pan out well for you either. I suggest just generally not saying no. When someone comes to you with an idea, say thank you. We're going to evaluate it, put it in your idea bank, triage it later. Impact confidence is, then communicate back to this person, say, look, we think it's pretty low impact based. Here's our explanation. There's not a lot of evidence, and it's going to be that much work. And here are some other ideas that we have that are trying to achieve the same things. So help that person understand the reasoning. It has to be transparent and objective.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I built ProdPad. Was people were coming to me and thinking that I was this black box where their ideas would go to die. I built it so that I had some transparency into the system so they could see, yeah, that's a cool idea, but here's all the other ideas, and here's the ones that line up with this, and here's the ones that we've put some thought into. And yeah, it just helped me say no in more ways than I could manage as, frankly, quite a junior product manager who didn't have it all figured out back then.
Yeah, ProdPad is basically systemizing this whole approach, I would say.
Yeah, so thanks to folks like you for providing insights like this that we can build into it. So really helpful.
You're being humble. You're a thought leader yourself, and you actually contributed.
No, you are. All right, we got to stop this. So you did say a moment ago that you had another slide that sort of talked about the gamut of experiments and stuff. Do you want to talk us through that?
Yeah, I'll go through this one real quick, and then I'll go to the gamut. So we're going now to the steps layer. We covered the goals layer. We talked about ideas, prioritization, ICE. Now we're going to build this thing, but there's two options. We like the idea. It looks great on our ICE score. We're just going to build it. It's 3 months, and then we'll see what happens. And we can always launch and iterate, right? So a couple of things happen. It's not 3 months, it's 6 months. That's just reality. And during these 3 months, you're not actually learning anything new because you're very focused on delivery. So, and then you launch this thing, and surprise, it's actually one of the few ideas, the majority of ideas that aren't good. And no matter how much you will iterate on it, it will never work, essentially. And I've made this mistake many times. So instead, of course, what we want to do, start with that same idea and build it, but through a series of what we call learning milestones. So basically, those are experiments, if you like, where we build something, put it in front of users, measure the result, and then make a decision, a conscious decision what to do next. And sometimes it means dumping the idea. That's a very good result too. And sometimes it means pivoting it. So that's why the arrow is changing directions. And an idea that survives this whole process is built. First off, you're moving on the scope front, you're building more and more advanced with each one of those. And you're also learning. So it will be much more profound when you launch it compared to the idea you started with. So it's both a way to filter the bad ideas and to improve on the good ones. Now, the industry calls a lot of these experiments, but I feel that experiment is not quite the right word. So I opted for steps. And inventing new terminology is a really bad idea. But I just felt that experiments doesn't quite capture it. Plus, steps fitted with just much better than if it was an E. But I'll show you now the kind of validation steps you might take here, and not all of them are steps. So people tend to think that experimentation is about building a very heavyweight experimentation, A/B experimentation platform, or carrying out 1,000 users interviews, or doing really the heavyweight stuff. And that's true. We need to do some of that, but there are many other ways to validate ideas. We touched on some of those in the confidence meter. So in order to explain this, I created this kind of visualization, and I like to break it into 5 buckets: assessment, fact-finding, test, experiments, and release results. Catchy acronym after. So in assessment, there's things like you have an idea in your hand and you ask, which goal does this actually align to? Is it on any of our quarterly or yearly goals? If the answer is no, either you need to park it for now or change the goals. And that's a really easy and quick validation technique. Business modeling, we talked a little bit about this. ICE analysis, assumption mapping is a very powerful technique. I highly recommend to everyone to learn. David J. Bland, kind of finding what are the risks or the assumptions in your idea, and stakeholder reviews, but usually one-on-one. Don't bring them all together into a stakeholder party, because they will gang up on you. So those are really cheap and fairly fast ways to just see if the idea pans out. Fact-finding is about diving into your data, or running surveys, or doing competitive analysis, or user interviews, or field research. Some of these are not as cheap. Some of those you need to do on an ongoing basis, but all of those give you data. And that's the next kind of layer or next area in the confidence meter. If the idea still looks good, you're going to start building it and testing. But the first versions are completely fake. You kind of fake it before you make it. So this could be smoke tests or fake door tests, where you put a button in the UI, but when they click on it, you say, we're not quite ready now. Do you want us to notify you when it's ready? That's a very classic way to do this. Wizard of Oz, where you put a human behind the scenes during the usability test to simulate the thing. Concierge test, where you actually build a functioning service, but it's completely human operated. Ability test, you guys know about those. So those are much cheaper ways to validate the idea at a higher level without having to commit too much engineering resources. Then you go into mid-level tests, where you are building early versions that are rough, not complete, not polished, not scalable, but they're good to go, where you can start giving this to people. Sometimes these are external people, sometimes it's your own team. This is what we call fish food in Google. And then if you still feel good about this idea, and this idea is big enough to justify heavyweight testing, you might do a beta, launch it as a lab where people can turn it on in settings. If it's for developers on operating system, you can do a preview, or you can do a dog food where your entire company or large part of your company is actually testing it. Very popular in Silicon Valley. When I joined Microsoft, the first thing I noticed was that Outlook was very buggy, and I asked people what's going on, and said, that's because we're dog fooding the next version of Outlook that will come in 1.5 years from now. That's the mentality. Every opportunity to test is a good opportunity. Then what I do, consider experiments, is what statisticians like to call experiments, which is a test with a control element. So A/B tests, ABN tests, multivariate tests, etc. And even the launch phase, like you build the whole thing, you're ready for delivery, launch it gradually. Stop at 30% and see what happens. Then stop at 99.5% and do a holdback experiment and see for a few weeks how this 0.5% differ from the rest. And even after you launch, keep tracking it. Keep looking if the results you expect materialize and there's no negative side effects. Sometimes you'll need to roll it back. So use every opportunity to learn before, during, and after the development. So that's the model.
Excellent. So with all these different types of validation, there's almost no reason why we can't pick a few and validate our ideas before they go live.
Absolutely. There's no excuse, honestly.
Excellent. And I love the difference between fish fooding and dog fooding. I've never really used that term, fish fooding. And you said the difference is that fish fooding is when your team uses it and dog fooding is when the whole team, the whole company uses it.
Yeah, in Google, in Gmail, every time we had a new feature come out, we had the team working on it actually use it for a while. And that teaches you an awful lot. This was true for a lot of very successful products like the iPhone. The first users of the iPhone, the internal team, it was a big secret. No one else at Apple was allowed to see it, but they started using it themselves.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Very cool. And you talked about assumption mapping and David J. Bland. I've actually got him coming on this webinar in May. He's going to be our guest coming up soon.
Yeah, he's a great guy and very smart. So this should be fun.
So we'll definitely ask him about that and refer back to this.
Cool. Awesome.
Excellent. Somebody actually asked in the one of the questions here is, are there any guidelines as when to use fish fooding or dog fooding?
I don't know that there's hard and fast rules for any of those. Fish fooding, it needs to make sense for the people building it. If you're building something for, I don't know, medical professionals doing operation in the operation theater, there's no point in either fish fooding or dog food. You're not the target audience. But if the people that are working on the team are actually in the target audience, absolutely, have them use it first. Even if they're not in the target audience, you can do what's called a bug bash. You just ask them to complete a set of tasks, to actually use the software they've developed to complete a set of tasks that the end user will need to do. And sometimes that actually brings home how good or bad the experience is, and it really helps them identify. I didn't put it there, but the bug bash is another validation technique. Excellent.
Okay. So how does this fit within the gist? Like, would these be considered part of the steps? Would you be saying we're in a discovery part of it, and therefore the step we're going to take is a usability test?
Yeah. So managing the whole project is actually connected to the task layer. How do we put all of this into action? So I think this will answer your question.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So the problem I see in a lot of organizations is that the world is split into two worlds. The planners, the people who think about the strategy, the roadmaps, the projects, the business goals. They think in terms of quarters and business results. And then there's the people who are focused on execution, the designers, the engineers, the developers, the QA. They're thinking in very short term sprints, tickets, moving things to the done state, pushing little increments of code into production. And there's this gap between these two worlds. They don't understand each other. They don't trust each other often. The plans that come from the top, these people are very skeptical about them, justifiably so sometimes. And these people in the top, they don't understand what all this iteration thing is. What we're agile, but nothing is coming out at the end. Like, when are you going to give us that feature we ask for? And the product manager is sandwiched in the middle. That person, sometimes called the product owner now, especially in Europe, is supposed to make all of this work. It's supposed to deliver on the roadmap, supposed to feed the agile machine, supposed to create perfectly prioritized product backlogs, perfectly curated user stories and epics. And a lot of product managers are not happy because they're perpetuating a dysfunctional system, to be honest. Have you seen this model working in any companies, or have you encountered this?
Yeah, I've definitely seen this split of the two worlds. And I think a lot of product people are trying to find, or a lot of companies are trying to find that the way to make the two jive together.
Yeah. So this is really where companies like Google differ, at least Google at the time I was there. It wasn't split this way. And that's the mentality I'm trying to bring into. So what I suggest for teams to do is, okay, keep on your agile rituals, everything, whether it's Kanban or Scrum, perfectly fine. But find some middle ground between the roadmap, the high-level plan, and the sprints that are so here and now. And I suggest something like the gist board, for example. So it's basically the top 3 layers of gist. Here are the key results from our goals. Maybe we need to shorten the average onboarding time to 2 days, but right now it's 5.5. Maybe activation rates need to go up, and also some technical goals, because teams need to work on these things too, or design goals. So it's not just product goals. And then the ideas we're working on now, we might have more ideas in the idea bank, but these are the snapshot that we chose through whatever prioritization process to work on. And for each one of these ideas, what are the next few steps? And this is a very dynamic kind of map of the work. And we're using it to project manage the work. Sorry for using this antiquated term, but I think it's something that's really missing. So the way it works, the leads of the team, the PM, the Eng lead, the UX designer, create the board, beginning of the quarter, review it with the team, change it based on feedback. And then we meet around the board every week or 2 and review the changes. And it's good to make a lot of changes offline, not to force everyone to know. But it's really important to have this discussion. First off, reminder, these are the goals. We're not just coding here, we're trying to achieve something. Yep. Second, these are the ideas. Remember that idea that was on the board last time, it's gone. It turned out to be bad. We replaced it, here's a new one with some steps. And let's talk about the steps. How are they going? The most critical steps, are they progressing? Can we shift resources? Really talk. And a lot of team members tell me that this really helps bring a lot of context to them. They really work with a lot of understanding of what's actually required to do. And that context takes away a lot from a lot of the needs to create these perfectly curated backlogs and user stories. And that's the experience I had at Google. When people know what they're supposed to do, you don't need to tell them. They actually tell you. And it's really rewarding when they come and show you something and say, hey, I thought this will work better. What do you think? You're like, respect. That's, if you disagree, you can push back. But in general, 60% of what I ever launched in Google was not my idea at all. And I wasn't in any of my specs or anything like that. So the way you want to work.
That's actually really powerful product management, is if most of the things aren't your idea, it's not your job to have all the ideas. It's your job to ask the best questions and to coordinate and to pull in the best insights for people in your team and create a system by which the best ideas can be surfaced. So it sounds like you found a system by which that would happen. This is really beautiful, by the way. I really like how it pulls together all those different elements, the goals, the ideas, the steps, the work all into one place, and everyone can see what's going on.
Yeah, and it's also a useful snapshot for the managers, the leaders, the stakeholders who are generally interested what's happening with the team.
Yeah.
The sprint status doesn't tell them much, but if you can share this on a bi-weekly email, say, and tell them this idea we tested, those were the results, we decided it's not good enough, they can push back as well. They can come in and say, I disagree. It's good to have this discussion at that level, but they don't have to steer you. They understand that you're moving on your own accord in the direction of business results. And that builds trust in you and your team.
Yeah, and I also love that it's tying things back to the overarching goals. I think one of the big problems with a lot of roadmaps is that it's basically just a list of things to do over time. And then at the end of the day, you just have a bunch of stuff done, maybe. But this really ties down to, here's the stuff, here's why we're doing it, and here's how we might go about doing it. Here's the experiments and the stuff that we're trying to do. And it creates a lot of cohesion, as opposed to this pile of chaos, which I think is where a lot of teams end up with the roadmap.
I think ProdPad does the same, right? You guys basically create a shared view that everyone can.
Actually, if you take one of these, like one of these stripes here, like the average onboarding time, that stripe of stuff there, and tip it on its side, that's basically a roadmap card. So each one of these things where it says goals, that'd be the objectives at the top. And the ideas would be, I could imagine those being almost the initiative level, and then the steps being the experiments, the ideas underneath that. Very similar sort of concept. It also maps very closely to Teresa Torres' opportunity solution tree, where it's linked to what are the opportunities and therefore the solutions, and you're prioritizing at the opportunity level.
Yeah, totally. She calls them experiments and solutions, but it's the same thing at the end of the day. We're all kind of creating something that tries to connect the strategy on one hand to action at the end, and by creating these layers in the middle. So that's why I don't claim that it's a completely original idea, although I think I arrived at it individually,
Oh,
independent,
yeah.
but many other people arrived at it independently themselves. So
exactly that, exactly. And this is what we're discovering by having all these conversations and having all these experiences within these companies, is that ultimately to organize our teams, we need to have something to point us towards what it is we're doing, and then still be able to show the more granular work, which I think is why so many people have landed upon the same sort of thing, but have different terminology for it. And I love that everyone has different terminology for it, and everyone who's joined me on this has come in with different ways of talking about it. And I think that's fine. Like every person, every company I talk to has different ways that they talk about these different pieces of work. And I think it's important that it's like everyone knows that it's okay. You call it what you call it, as long as it's consistent within your team.
Right.
So call them ideas, call them experiments, call them initiatives, call them goals, call them KPIs, objectives. Frankly, no one cares. It's just make sure that your team knows what you're talking about when you're talking about them. And
basically all the processes there are just ways to create some sort of order in this chaos and drive meaningful discussions. So by abstracting things and saying it needs to look like an OKR, it needs to look like an idea with an I score. In this example, it's just a way for people to discuss these things without letting egos and opinions and biases take control of the discussion.
Yeah. So everyone, this is another feather to add to your cap. Absolutely. Keep this GIST board as an example. I think it's a really good example of how to align teams and bring a sense of cohesion to the work that you're doing. What does everyone think? Is that going to be useful?
Yeah.
Now, we've run out of time for questions, but I want to finish by saying a huge thank you to you all. Really great to have you all jumping in on the chat and all your questions. And a giant thank you to Itamar Gilad for sharing his GIST framework and his confidence meter and all of his thoughts here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Wonderful. Great having you here today, and talk to you again. See you here next month. Bye for now.